I discovered the haunted true story behind a war film that left me terrified. I never should have opened that door. It pulled me in like an unholy magnet, whispering secrets I was never meant to know. Every Friday night, I'd flip through old war films lost in the smoke and chaos, drawn to the grit of the battlefield. But one film gripped me like no other. The moment it flickered to life, an icy chill washed over me. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air thickened. It was as if the room transformed into a war zone, heavy with gunpowder and despair. I could almost feel the weight of metal on my skin, the low hum of engines rumbling outside, and yet, there was something more, something sinister. The filmmaker had vanished shortly after completing the movie. He was a legend, living in the dark corners of history. Whispers of haunting surrounded him. Sets left abandoned, actors lost to tragedy, and an all-consuming dread lingered. It drew me deeper, an insatiable urge to uncover the truth that I could hear it. Faint echoes of laughter mingled with screams bouncing off the walls of my mind. I glanced at my reflection and froze. A shadow flickered behind me, but when I turned, nothing was there. Just silence, and the distant crackle of the film's haunting sound score. My heart raced, the ominous feeling thickened, like fog closing in. As I continued, objects around me started to shift, papers rustled on my desk. My breathing grew shallow. A dark presence settled in the room, creeping closer, taunting me. The lights dimmed, flickering like an old projector on its last leg. I could see the shapes in the darkness, fingers of shadow reaching for me. It's just fear, I whispered to myself, but the cold seeped into my bones. Then came the noise, soft at first, like footsteps on the gravel of a forgotten path. I strained to listen. Was someone else here? My pulse raced, each beat a drum echoing in my ears. I felt trapped, my body frozen in place. The air crackled with energy, anticipation folding around me. Then it happened. A loud crash. My heart leaped as a door slammed shut somewhere in my apartment. Everything went silent. The shadows loomed larger, darker. I scrambled to my feet, mind racing. I had to know what was hidden behind that door. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door loomed before me, an abyss gaping in the dim light of my apartment. Its aged wood was warped, battered by years of neglect. A thin crack of splintered veneer whispered promises of darkness on the other side. My heart thudded in concert with my rising dread. The silence was all-consuming, a heavy blanket smothering any remaining logic. Just a door, I muttered, my voice quivering as it broke the thick quiet. Just a door. Yet, in my gut, I knew it wasn't merely an entrance. It was the threshold to a realm I was ill-prepared to confront. The flickering light bulbs overhead stuttered and dimmed further, casting grotesque shadows that writhed like living things. I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling as chills raced up my spine. It turned slowly, a rusty protest echoing in my ears, and with a final creak, the door drifted open. What lay before me was not the familiar storage room I had believed it to be. Instead, darkness poured from within, folding into the corners of the apartment like a slithering entity. The air grew heavy, saturated with the scent of decay, musty earth, and something else, something putrid, lingering on the edge of my consciousness. I stepped inside, compelled by an unseen force. The walls were lined with old film reels, unopened and untouched, a tomb of yellowing celluloid. Haphazardly stacked, they towered precariously, as though warning me of an impending collapse. The shadows deepened, and I could almost hear the whispers of long-lost souls trapped within the film, begging me to watch, to see their stories unfold. Just as I turned to retreat, something caught my eye. A flicker of movement from the far corner of the room, a pale shape slipped behind the shelves, evading my gaze. My pulse quickened as my breath caught in my throat. Hello? My voice trembled. What had I disturbed? Suddenly, the air shifted. A chill enveloped me, drawing closer around my shoulders, and the very fabric of reality seemed to stretch and twist. An appalling silence prevailed, and then, like a foghorn blasting through the dark, the rustle of pages began, the sound of an unseen book flipping open repeatedly, almost reverently. Step by step, I approached, a ghastly curiosity overshadowing my fear. The flickering light barely reached the farthest shelf, and with a violent pulse, the shadow coalesced into something almost human. Its features were indistinct, but the glimmer in its eyes was sharp and unnerving, as if it possessed a knowledge that transcended to me, as if it had seen the macabre theater of war unfold firsthand. Help me, it whispered, a voice layered with desperation, echoing like distant cannon fire. You must finish. The film, an icy grip encircled my heart. A jolt of recognition sliced through my terror. The connection was undeniable. This was more than a mere specter. It was a remnant, a fragment of a story left unfinished, and it yearned to spill its truth. The connection to the film was deeper than I had grasped, intertwining with my very existence. Who are you? I stammered, the urge to flee clashing with an overwhelming need to understand. What happened to you? The figure leaned closer, fragments of memories flickering behind its eyes, visions of battlefields soaked in blood, soldiers trapped in an endless cycle of horror. You must watch, it implored, to know, to feel. A crash reverberated from somewhere deep within the room, snapping the weight of the moment and jolting me back into clarity. My breath quickened. The shadows lurched. Panic took hold and I bolted, skidding back towards the door. But as I reached the threshold, the figure's hand shot out, its cold fingers brushing against my wrist, paralyzing me with a frigid grip. Do not leave, it hissed, its voice now layered with insistent urgency. Do not abandon the truth. The earth trembled, the walls seeming to sway, and just as I felt myself slip into the void, a single reel tumbled off the shelf, landing at my feet with a muted thud. The Tidlian echo of despair scrawled in faded ink across its surface. As I stared down at it, the shadows twisted, writhing in anticipation. I could feel the eyes of the dead upon me, waiting, expecting me to choose, to reveal the horrors they had buried. Then the room plunged into darkness, and I was left alone with the whispers of the damned, their demands swirling around me like a tempest. My heart raced, the final question dislodging itself in my mind: would I dare to unveil the secrets, or would I become just another wailing spirit trapped beneath the weight of forgotten violence? Then, from the thickness of the shadow, I heard it. A child's laughter, haunting and hollow. The echo called out from somewhere deep in the dark, "Join us," and with that, the chilling grip tightened around my heart once more. The laughter echoed, a taunting melody that twisted through the eerie stillness, and I felt my stomach churn with unease. The shadows seemed to pulse around me, undulating as if alive, and the weight of despair pressed heavily on my chest. I cursed my decision to intrude upon this forgotten room, this grave of anguish and hidden narratives. I forced myself to move, an instinctual urge to escape the grasp of that sinister presence. But every step I took felt like wading through a river of lead. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices merging into an overwhelming statement, rising and falling like a tide. Each voice, no less than dozens, chanted in unison, weaving tales of fear and violence, clashing swords, and screams echoing into eternity. The darkness deepened, creeping up my legs as if eager to swallow me whole. I clawed at the wall for stability, feeling the cool tremor of the wood beneath my palm. In that instant, a burst of light flickered through the air, illuminating the room for a heartbeat. I caught and held on to the barest glimpse of what lay before me. Small, childish figures, shadowed in contours of despair, danced around the edges of my vision. They were soldiers once, too young to wield weapons, now trapped in the limbo of an unfinished story, a living tableau haunted by their own demise. Watch. The figure's voice seeped back into my consciousness. It was stronger now, more insistent. Watch, or never understand. Panicking, I turned on my heel, yearning to escape this suffocating space, but the door was no longer behind me. The threshold I had crossed had vanished, swallowed by the inky void. My pulse raced. I began to breathe erratically, each intake morphing into a choked gasp as the air thickened with the stench of decay. "Help me," I heard again, this time from all around me. The depersonalized voice shifted into dozens of wails, each begging for respite from the eternal torment that shackled them. I pressed my hands to my ears to block out the sound, but the voices surged through me, each sob winding tighter along my heart, like a noose drawn by invisible hands. That I in the center of the room, the eerie child's laughter cut through the din, sharper and more insistent. Join us, it chimed, ropey threads of innocence twisted with a horrific cadence. I focused on the source of the haunting echoes, and suddenly a grotesque vision swirled into focus. That a pale hand reached up from the shadows, tiny fingers curling as if beckoning me forward. Each flicker of light revealed Moria's circle of children, their forms distorted, looking up at me with eyes clouded in grief. I could see blood-stained uniforms, memories of laughter drowned beneath the tides of war. No! I shouted, horrified at the sorrowful scene unfolding before me. Let me go. But my voice was lost amid the choir of the lost. And then a sharp crack, like a whip, cut through the darkness. The film reel at my feet rolled away, twisting like a live serpent before crashing against the wall. The room trembled as it tore open, revealing a flickering screen, the lights creating a chaotic dance of images and souls long departed. I was compelled to step closer, the specter's hand still gripping my wrist, pulling me inexorably toward the unfolding nightmare. Faces formed on the screen, young men, brothers, some barely older than the children surrounding me. They laughed beneath a sun that felt so far away. But then the colors shifted violently, drenched in red as shadows drew closer, and the sound of gunfire filled the air, a thunderous symphony of despair. The imagery grew frantic, a visceral juxtaposition of joy turned sour, laughter warped into screams. That I in that moment, recognition sparked with the intensity of a lens focusing sharply. The flickering memories were mine. I was there, woven into their tales, hidden among the ranks. The truth erupted within me. The existence of this place was not arbitrary. It was a part of my haunted lineage, a history that I had unknowingly inherited. But as I gazed deeper into the maelstrom of horrific revelations, the ambient light dulled, pulling me back into the suffocating shadows. I tried to break free, instinct commanding my legs to run, yet I found myself adrift in this spectral realm. Join us, came the chorus again, a command woven from desperation and reluctant temptation. The very ground beneath me trembled, and the walls began to close in, narrowing the space around me. I could almost feel the warmth of their tiny hands reaching towards my heart, their pain merging with my OWN.AS. The brimming panic surged anew, the child's laughter peaked in an inhuman crescendo. And in that drawn-out moment before all light extinguished, I felt something shift inside me, a merging of souls, crossing over into a realm I was not ready to explore. Suddenly, the last flickering light died, and darkness engulfed me entirely, but this darkness carried a weight far greater than the flickering horror I had known. It felt sentient, fed by the gathered souls awaiting my decision, the choice that would define if I would emerge alive or be claimed by the shadows forever. The air thickened again, pregnant with malice, and as a cold breath enveloped me, I felt the first piercing stab of realization that I had been led here for a purpose, a fate intertwined with this haunting saga of sorrow and vengeance. And as a frigid whisper brushed against my ear, something ancient uttered the chilling promise, "It's your turn to play." The darkness churned. I felt the oppressive weight of the darkness swirling around me, its icy tendrils creeping into every corner of my mind. The whispers escalated, their collective murmur morphing into a singular voice that reverberated like thunder, pulsating with a dread that dug deep into my bones. Join us, join in the game. The phrase twisted around the corners of my consciousness like a serpent coiling tighter. I could feel the pull of the shadows becoming more pronounced, eager to envelope my essence into their dark choir. I fought against their grip, instinctively clawing at the air, but it was as if my limbs had become encased in lead, each movement a Herculean effort against an unseen force. Suddenly, the void trembled, and a contour emerged from the depths, forming into grotesque shapes that resonated with the darkness. Wisps of smoke twisted and twirled around me, solidifying into twisted versions of the children still trapped in their eternal dance. They bore twisted grins, their eyes glinting with something sinister, an unholy blend of joy and anguish, forever tethered to this realm of torment. Will you remember us? Their voices harmonized, an eerie lullaby laced with sorrow. They circled me, their misshapen bodies drifting like shadows in the half-light, drifting closer, suffocating me with their presence. That I struggled to breathe, a sense of desperation clawing at my throat. "Please, no, let me go." I gasped, the echo of my plea swallowed by the darkness like another lost soul. But the laughter erupted again, warping into a cacophony of disjointed cries. They were no longer children, they were specters of the damned, reclamation forged through suffering. Each echoed phrase coaxed memories from depths I had long buried. Flickers of faces from my past emerged, distorted and hewn from the fabric of this nightmare. Fathers, brothers, and uncles smiled back at me, each transformation darkened by looming shadows, tethering them to this malevolence. "Can you see us, cousin?" A whisper flowed like silk through the inky night, and I froze, the voice echoing from a place I hadn't wished to remember. The memories surged once more, cascading like a horrifying montage. A landscape filled with smoke and despair, me family's painful saga of war unraveling before me. The laughter faded to reveal sharp screams, the visage of relatives long gone, and the guilt buried under layers of inherited pain. "Join us," the voices implored, the rhythm of their chants rooted in sorrow and hunger. Cold fingers brushed against my face, icy as death, soft as a whisper. I shuddered violently but could not shake the sensation of being loved and lost all at once. In the suffocating dark, the flickers of warmth began to coalesce again. The memories swirled, shadowy figures reaching out. I could almost touch their outstretched hands. It was intoxicating. The warmth of family beckoned me home, promising to reveal secrets long buried. As if sensing my yielding, the shadows roared, their presence overwhelming. The spirals of darkness convulsed as though alive. With each movement, the echoes grew louder, unmasking a deeper horror. The children I had once seen transformed into warriors. Beneath their innocence was a bloodlust that vibrated through the air. "Fight with us," they urged. "Even in death, we need one more brave soul." No. I screamed, the sound piercing through me, and as I turned to flee, the shadows erupted into vengeful laughter. Suddenly, the pressure intensified, pushing me to my knees. I slammed my palms against the damp floor, feeling the pulse of lives lost beneath the earth. The shadows churned, shrieking as they morphed into a massive face, contorted, anguished, a rotting visage that bled sorrow. "I am your legacy," it bellowed, its voice a thunderous wave crashing over me. My heart raced as I struggled against the urge to succumb to the darkness surrounding me. I felt the pull becoming unbearable, begging to be united with this ancestral wail. And then, as if summoned by the shadows, an image erupted in the tempest, my own face reflecting back at me, twisted into a grim expression of dread. In that moment, knowledge surged within. I understood too late. Each soldier I had seen, each child lost in the throes of violence, were linked to me, threads of my lineage entwined with their despair. I was to partake in their cursed legacy, a final sacrifice to appease an insatiable hunger. As my vision began to fragment, the figure loomed once more, shadows dancing around it like moths drawn to a flame. "Embrace your fate, it's your turn to play." I felt the shadows enfold me, tearing at the very fabric of my being, and just as despair reached its climax, I caught a last glimpse of something unexpected, a lingering light at the farthest corner of the darkness, pulsing with escalating intensity, but even that flicker began to fade. What is that?" I choked out, my voice fading to a whisper. In that moment, the cold grip released, but before I could find the strength to rise, the floor beneath me shuddered violently, cracking wide open. An abyss called from below, a yawning maw that sent all remnants of warmth evaporating. Without warning, blackened arms erupted from the chasm, grasping at my legs, pulling me toward the darkness. Before I could scream, the earth swallowed me whole. The freezing blackness engulfed me as I plummeted into the depths of the abyss. The shadows swirled around me, hungry whispers echoing against the cold stone walls. Time lost all meaning as I fell, a pit countless tales deep, each one a fragment of sorrow that had been forgotten. My heart thundered, panic seizing my breath as the darkness pressed tighter, almost sentient in its malicious glee. Just as I felt I would be crushed beneath the weight of despair, I landed hard upon a rocky surface, the cold permeating through my clothes, curling into my skin. Groaning, I pushed myself up, gasping for air. As my eyes adjusted, shapes came into focus, not just shadows this time, but figures, grotesque silhouettes crawling from the cavern walls, their lantern-like eyes fixated on me, glowing with a malevolent hunger. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice rasped from the depths, reviving my thread of fear. It was low, hollow, and coated in ash, echoing endlessly. The air crackled with a sense of foreboding. I turned to see the spectral figure of a woman, her skin taut against the gaunt structure of her face, where shadows darted with life yet exuded decay. "You've awakened us," she hissed, her breath misting in the cold air. "Do you not realize the curse you tread upon?" curse? I stammered, looking around at the mass gathering of lost souls drawn to me, all hewn from the darkness, faces twisted in anguish and despair. What do you mean, in this place, you are bound to your lineage, she whispered, stepping closer, drawn by my growing horror. Each family, each memory buried within these walls, we are reflections of what once was. We are the echoes of the battlefields, the ungrieved and the unheard. The realization crashed into me. Their faces mirrored my lost family. I recoiled, the suffocating weight of ancestral guilt once more threatening to drown me. What do you want from me? To remember, she said, her voice now a cold caress. To bear witness to their pain, their deaths. As she spoke, figures from the corners moved closer, their sobs rising like a horrific symphony. I could hear their stories swirl around me in whispers, each cry clawing at my heart. Memories I had forgotten surged for the harrowing battle in a distant land, the flash of rifles echoing my own father's sacrifice, my brother's last words whispered like a prayer mingling with the cries of innocence lost in the crossfire ringing from me. Tears I thought had long dried, join us they chorused, voices intertwining in a blend of longing and rage. You are part of our story now. A searing pain lanced through my chest, branding my heart with their unrelenting memories. I felt them, urging me to remember, while shadows pulsed and swirled around my legs, wrapping me in nostalgia full of despair. In that dark void, I saw their faces. They were pleading, yet accusing, withdraw from light and into the remorse that carried my name, but then came a flash abrupt and searing. A vision of glory intermingled with blood, where valor danced hand in hand with tragedy. A rift of light painfully broke the shackles of agony. Fight! The woman cried, and suddenly her eyes were ablaze with fervor. Fight against it. Do not be lost among the ashes. I shook my head, panic fueling my resolve as I forced my feet to move. I turned in search of the flickering escape I'd glimpsed before, the pulsing light urging me onward through the parade of souls that rippled beside me. With each step, the figures wailed, a cacophony meant to bind me to their stories, but I pressed ahead, yearning for the luminescence. As I neared the pulsating glow, reality began to fracture. The walls around me warped, shadows clawing at my consciousness, whispering dreadful tales of my lineage, each word wrapping around my mind tighter. I reached out, fingers grazing the light, and for a heartbeat, the warmth soothed my frayed nerves, but then, in a trembling pulse, the glow erupted into fog, a gaseous tendril reaching out like a malevolent vine. It coiled around my wrist, pulling me with it, dragging me back into the maze of twisted faces and mocking laughter. No! I screamed, twisting against the encroaching force. The light flickered before disappearing, leaving me entangled in the warm cocoon of despair, while the shadows surged, filling my lungs with a terrible chill. No! The figures closed in, their eyes narrowing with delight at my struggle. You cannot escape your fate. You belong to us now. I was paralyzed, dread electrifying my spine as I realized the terrible truth. I had become a pawn in the unending game, bound to inherit the cycle of agony and sorrow carried through time. Ghostly fingers kissed my skin, and with a bone-chilling roar, they pulled me deeper underground. As the last remnants of light faded, I heard her voice again, echoing from the abyss, time will remember you forever bound. Just then, a violent tremor shook the ground, and the world shattered around me. I was engulfed. My screams were lost in the cacophony. Then, silence. And in that suffocating void, I sensed something stirring, a new entity beyond comprehension beginning to awaken. Your blood ignites the flames, it breathed, a hushed whisper circling like smoke. And then, I knew I was not alone. The silence was suffocating. I lay amidst the remnants of shattered darkness, the weight of my fear pressing down like an iron shroud. In the stillness, the remnants of the cacophony faded into a haunting echo, yet I could barely shake the sensation of being watched. Something loomed, an ancient presence coiling in the depths of my mind. Your blood ignites the flames, it had said, and the words reverberated in my consciousness, as vivid as the ghostly faces of my ancestors that had surrounded me. My heart raced, the pulsing dread flickering at the edges of my awareness like a dying embers of hope. I drew in a breath, preparing myself to call out, to reconnect with string of warmth I had glimpsed before, but the air around me thickened with a suffocating chill. Panic roiled within as I fought against the creeping cold that crawled along my skin. This darkness was alive, pulsating with a dark hunger that seeped into my very bones. Then, from the haze, I caught a flicker, a memory ignited by fear. Echoes of laughter warped into a song of lament. Faces twisted in despair hitched their parched breaths toward the silhouette that danced at the edges of my periphery. The visage was shrouded, a dark champion of this wretched domain. Home, it whispered, and I felt the word twine around my heart like a serpent constricting its prey. Remember, with a sudden resolve, I stumbled to my feet, the stone surface slick beneath my weight. I could feel them, the lost souls, a murmur rising in haunting resonance as I dared to speak their name. I remember you. My voice fought against the shadows, quaking yet defiant, the words cutting through the dark like a sword forged in anguish. There came a throaty chuckle, tinged with despair. Ah, but remembrance is not liberation. You are woven into our fabric, your essence is ours. We are flesh and spirit intertwined, the entity crooned, its voice sending tremors through the earth below my feet. With trembling limbs, I walked further into the spectral embrace of the unknown. Each step felt like crossing a threshold into madness, as faces emerged from the void, transformed into ghastly mockeries of their former selves, fingers pointing, lips whispering in an echo of pain that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Feel their torment. They cried as I staggered, flinching with each agonized wail swirling around my ears. I clasped my hands over my face in a desperate attempt to block out the horror, but images crashed against me like waves, engrossing me in a memory of blood-soaked earth and desperate cries ricocheting through time that and the dim light of understanding, I discerned the horrific vortex of conflict that had rooted within my veins, the roar of cannon fire, cries of my kinsmen trapped in a dominion of chaos, the creeping dread that came with the acceptance of a belief system built on agony. I was condemned to inherit their scars, melded into the very essence of the haunting despair they had carried into this dark realm. No. I screamed, joining their wails, but the shadows only laughed, a menacing force that cloaked me deeper into oblivion. Your cry means nothing here. You will be ours, just as they were. Desperation clawed up my throat as I began to sprint blindly through the dim expanse, my heart racing. But the air thickened, an unseen pressure pinched at my chest, and the ground quaked beneath my feet. Pockets of darkness seemed to surge towards me, fueled by my bloodline, casting a web of tendrils that twisted and turned, seeking to ensnare me. Suddenly, a specter appeared before me, a flickering amalgamation of all the lost faces I had encountered before. Their eyes were voids, reflecting 1,000 lifetimes of suffering. You must choose, it rumbled, the despair crawling into the very recesses of my mind. Join us and know your lineage, or fight against the tide and lose everything, even your existence. The chilling tension gripped my heart, and for a moment, I faltered. Chaos whispered sweet promises of belonging, while the specters beckoned with shattered hope, a harrowing tug-of-war wrought with heartache. As I hesitated, succumbing to uncertainty, the ground beneath me began to tremble, a fissure crackling open, exhaling a putrid stench that whispered from the abyss. I could hear something stirring in the depths, a dark titan shaking off the dust of ages, something that slumbered within the marrow of the earth, a force that indeed needed my blood ignited. No. I shrieked, my throat raw, as the fissure widened, and the darkness began to seep upward like broken dreams clawing for the light. Their wails crescendoed into chaotic cries, a final message engulfed in urgency: it comes. It comes for you. Just as I turned to sprint away, a branching tentacle of darkness lashed out from the fissure, wrapping around my ankle with an iron grip. Dread surged through me as I looked down, the shadowy tendril pulsing with life, pulling me backward. My scream mingled with the thrumming heartbeat of the void as I fell into the chasm, and I realized too late that this was only the beginning. And then everything went dark. The darkness was alive, a suffocating entity that rushed in to fill the void, swallowing me whole. I flailed, trying to claw my way out of the clutches of the abyss, but the very air hummed with an unnatural pulse, the heartbeat of something ancient and grotesque, whispering secrets into the hollows of my mind. The moment I thought I was free, the ground solidified beneath me, and I found myself sprawled in an otherworldly landscape, a grotesque reflection of the world I once knew. In place of familiar ground, I lay amidst a field of twisted corpses, their eyes wide with the horror of their demise, mouths frozen in screams that echoed in the chilling wind. The scent of decay enveloped me, thick and cloying, bearing witness to an age-old slaughter. Welcome, came a voice, ethereal and resonant, as if many souls spoke as one. I raised my head to see the manifestation of those who had once called this place home, their spirits conjoined in unholy union. Wispy fingers intertwined like strands of a macabre tapestry, woven with threads of blood and sorrow. Welcome to the battlefield of your ancestors. That I stumbled to my feet, my heart throbbing against the treachery of time, pondering the cost of their unending conflict. They had lived and died here, yet all that remained were shadows, soulless specters seeking solace in my flesh. Do you long for connection? Hissed one spirit, its visage a jarring blend of youthful innocence and aged sorrow. They called it honor, loyalty, but do not be fooled, it is suffering that binds. Can you endure it? Their eyes bore into me, searching for some spark of acceptance or understanding. With every heartbeat, their torment reverberated, a painful symphony thundering into my consciousness. I pressed my hands against my ears, desperate for silence, yet their cries burst through my defenses. Feel what we felt. Came the chant, a fevered insistence that resonated within the hollow coil of my being. Experience our pain, the world around me twisted, flashes of battle erupting like vivid nightmares. The screams of the dying mingled with the clangor of steel, and vivid images peeled away the layers of reality. I saw the ghosts of warriors facing off on a charred field, their faces adorned with despair and haunted by memories of loyalty turned malignant. Shadows danced along the periphery, mocking their fate, whispering doomed promises of glory. I was no longer an observer, I was a participant. Their agony flooded my veins, laced with hot fear and grief, tangibly echoing the memories etched in my bloodline. I staggered back, teetering on the brink of panic, yet the visions surged forward, overwhelming me. I gasped, overwhelmed as a single torrent of horror gripped my chest. I relived the choking air of gun smoke, the chilling cries of commanders lost in the cacophony of warfare. Every heartbeat reminded me of the bloodshed I was entwined with it, a mere pawn in their twisted game. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, a figure emerged, a towering wraith robed in ghostly white, its hollow eyes gleaming with an insatiable hunger. You are the conduit. It boomed, the voice a cacophony of tears and rage, piercing through the fabric of my being. Your lineage flows like a river of anguish, your essence, a key to our liberation. No. I screamed, defiantly shaking my head as the ground quaked at its proclamation. I must break free. Break free? It echoed with sardonic laughter, the very sound slicing through me like ice. You are chained here by blood and fate, they await your choice. Join us, or become a nothingness swallowed by time. The specters surged closer, darkness wrapping around me like a vice, its pressure palpable against my skin. In their eyes, I could see a reflection of my own trepidation, a distorted vision of what I could become. I was told I could end their suffering simply by accepting my role. Choose. The figure roared, and suddenly, fragments of my life before this insanity flickered like echoes, whispers of laughter, warmth, light. The price of my ancestry bore heavy on my soul, and I yearned to escape this relentless void, but within that flicker, I glimpsed another presence lurking behind the veil, an unspeakable horror hiding just beyond the edges of memory, gnashing its teeth in anticipation. I froze, recognizing it by the way it twisted the air, pure darkness, a predator lying in wait, a titan of nightmares, fueled by the anguish I wished to flee, fight or yield. It beckoned, its voice a sinister melody weaving through the shadows. The time is nigh. Offer yourself to those you once loved, or succumb to the darkness I offer. You can taste hope, or you can revel in despair. My throat tightened, and I could feel the warmth of my blood, the rhythm of every pulse synchronizing with the rhythm of the unholy battlefield. I was in a standoff between despair and hope, battle both internal and external raging within me, that I took a reluctant step forward, knowing I must choose. But just as I was about to voice the words that might seal my fate, the rift of shadows caved beneath me, and I plummeted again down into ever-deepening darkness, where my ancestors awaited. A bone-deep chill met me as I landed on something cold and wet, and I felt a fragment of something long forgotten, hiding in the shadows of my existence. The moment was suspended in eerie stillness, poised on the edge of revelation, and then I heard the whisper of a name, a single word that could unlock everything, echoing against the stony walls of my consciousness, the breath of the haunted, the heartbeat of the lost, the dark truth that called for my attention. Dare you remember? As I lingered on the precipice of memory, the shadows stirred, not just around me but within me, revealing the horror I had unearthed, a revelation too dark to confront. And just as I turned to face this new horror, the ground shuddered violently once more and an abysmal roar erupted from the depths, shaking the very foundations of what little sanity I had left. The last thing I felt was the ice-cold breath of a terror so profound that it swallowed my scream whole. The darkness clung to my skin like a damp shroud, seeping into the marrow of my bones as I lay paralyzed on the cold surface. The echo of that primal roar reverberated within the hollow cavity of my chest, drowning all remnants of logic. It filled the silence with dense weight, pressing down like an unseen hand intent on forcing me to surrender that I was not alone. The whispers of my ancestors, those ethereal voices begging for connection, faded but did not vanish. Instead, they morphed into a cacophony of anguished wails, an unending lamentation that transcended language. It was the pain of generations that had met similar fates, the agony of souls tethered to this grotesque realm while trapped in a cycle of tormented longing. Struggling to lift my head, I felt the chilling weight of the past wrap more tightly around me. My surroundings began to shift, the cold surface underneath me morphing into something alive, pulsating like a heartbeat. I squirmed, panic rallying in my chest, as the ground morphed under my weight. It was a grotesque mixture of flesh and earth, and it crawled with an unearthly sentience. Remember. An urgent voice demanded from the shadows creeping at the edges of my vision, as tendrils of darkness snaked closer, twining around my wrists like charnel vines that craved my essence. Suddenly, fragments of their stories burst into my mind, their sorrow-stained memories played out like a phosphorescent film before my eyes. I saw their flesh torn by shrapnel, their blood mingling with the dirt as they clawed at the ground for mercy, longing for salvation that never came. The memory blazed bright, a flash of terror that ignited the fibers of my being. Experience it. The voices cried in unison, drowning out my own thoughts as I was hurtled deeper into their posture, relentless tide of despair dragging me under. I was submerged in the horrors they suffered, my senses violated by the acrid scent of gunpowder mingling with the coppery taste of blood and the cries of the dying. They were insatiable, feeding on my fear, merging their pain with my own as I began to feel their lives slipping through my fingers, like grains of sand. With a surge of defiance, I clawed my way back to the surface, gasping for air that was no longer there. I looked around in desperation, searching for an escape. The faces of the fallen loomed before me, their expressions twisted in a grotesque dance of yearning and rage. Somehow, I became aware that their salvation hinged on me memories, my life, my choices intertwined with their binding curse. Do not let them take you. A voice suddenly cut through the nightmare, a voice distinct from the chorus of the damned, resonating with warmth and urgency. It felt like a soothing balm against the jagged edges of despair. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, but their features were blurred, undefined, a light flickering against the black currents that sought to overwhelm me. They are wrong. You are not their vessel. But just as the light expanded, illuminating the dark haze surrounding me, a sudden darkness eclipsed a monstrous eye bursting open from the void. It glared down at me, its gaze suffocating, and a hissing laughter erupted from its depths, intertwining with the anguished cries of the spirits around. You cannot escape, it intoned, the tongue of malice licking at the edges of my resolve. You were born to bear their burdens, gifted life to serve as a vessel of their despair. The shadows recoiled at the sight of this new abomination as if it held a power even they feared. I felt my heart tighten, my body growing heavy, tethered to the pulsing depths of darkness. The air crackled with malevolent energy as the conflict escalated, as if the veil between my existence and this eldritch horror was thin enough to break the cycle. The light figure urged me, its voice filled with desperation, shining bright against the deepening gloom. Call out to them. Claim your legacy without binding yourself to it. I closed my eyes against the overwhelming intensity, forcing myself to calm the storm within. But when I opened them, I saw the figures of the dead beginning to morph, their faces distorting with horror as the shadowed titan drew nearer, its eye widening, hungry and relentless. Name it. It commanded, and the walls of the abyss echoed back as if the darkness itself craved my declaration. The spirits surged forward, limbs stretched out in a pleading gesture, but through their shadowed forms, I also felt the rising tide of primal fear, both theirs and mine. I was at a precipice, the weight of both past and present pressing into my very core. Choose, then. Will you shackle yourself to your ancestors, or will you defy the darkness? My blood ran cold, freezing in my veins as the shadows writhed and flickered like dying embers around me, tightening their grip, and I knew whatever I chose would determine the fate of not just me, but all those who lingered between worlds, waiting for resolution. But before I could gather the strength to answer, the ground quaked violently once more, and the oppressive darkness surged crackling with rage in the face of my hesitation. Choose now. Echoed all around, the meaning varied and distorted, laced with promise and threat alike, threatening to consume everything I was, and then the abyss erupted, and all I could think in the onslaught of shadows was that I might just lose everything, including myself. The air thickened, suffocating in its pressure as the shadows coalesced into a spinning maelstrom, furiously swirling around me. Tendrils of darkness lashed out like frenzied serpents, tearing at my clothes and clawing at my skin. I gasped, the roiling mass seeking to claim me, to drag my essence down into its abyssal depths. The cries of the tortured souls rose to a fever pitch as their wails became a haunting symphony drowning out the last of my rational thoughts. Choose. Echoed deeper still, the demand an inescapable mantra laced with an ire that twisted the very souls of the fallen. In the chaos of that moment, I caught sight of the flickering figure insisting on my defiance, desperately trying to penetrate the thick shadows. You have the power. It shouted, voice cracking against the tempest of despair. You must remember. Call out to those who loved you. Struggling to gather clarity amid the surging darkness, I thought of my family, my life a flickering mosaic of memories woven together by laughter and love. Gritting my teeth, I fought against the encroaching shadows that sought to obliterate those precious fragments, to twist them into instruments of agony as they had for so many before me. Point to am not like you. I gasped, clenching my fists. I refuse to be bound by your tragedy. The shadows recoiled, momentarily slackening their grip, only to roar back with renewed fury, the monstrous eye widening as darkness spilled forth, consuming the very air I breathed. Fool. It hissed, a slithering sneer dripping from its voice. You think proclaiming a choice will save you? You are but a reflection of their pain, a vessel for their torment. In that moment, something within me snapped, a flicker of rebellion ignited against the oppressive weight of despair. With a guttural scream, I forced out a declaration, my own truth. I am not a vessel. I will not carry this burden. A tremor coursed through the shadows as my voice pierced the chilling veil. The tendrils recoiled, rippling like water disturbed by a sudden force. The figure of light surged forward, illuminating the darkness around me, but the eye remained steadfast, its baleful gaze seizing my form, threatening to obliterate my defiance. Such arrogance. The grotesque entity thundered, its laughter permeating the air like a vice, constricting around my heart. It drew closer, the abyss widening in tandem with my growing desperation, yet I held firm, feeling my own heartbeat pulse through the dark. Your defiance will feed the darkness. You cannot defy fate. The shadows surged again, ravenous for my essence as they surged over my feet, constricting my ankles in icy tendrils. Panic clawed at my throat. The faces of the spirits loomed closer, their expressions shifting from anguish to a terrifying hatred, their mouths twisting into distorted laughter. They hungered for my despair, feeding off my fear as the pressure enveloped me like a vice. Remember our pain. They chanted, their voices crawling under my skin, penetrating my resolve with icy tendrils. You will become one with us. For a fleeting instant, the connection surged deeper, dragging me once again into the collective memories of the dead, the charred remains of battle, the cries of men dying for a cause they couldn't comprehend, the anguished sobs of women left to mourn. I felt their grief merge with my own soul, becoming a fiery brand searing my consciousness. As their overwhelming pain clutched at my chest, I fought, forcing my breath in and out to stay grounded. My heart thundered in rebellion against the crushing weight. No. I reject you. I will not bear your anguish. With every ounce of strength, I pushed against the tide, and suddenly, a spark ignited within me, realization that I had the power to sever the chains binding me. In that instant, a shroud of light exploded from my core, illuminating the wailing spirits as it surged beyond the abyss, a beacon of resistance breaking through the oppressive gloom. The swirling shadows recoiled, the faces blurring in rage as the eye narrowed, its snarl echoing through the darkness. Do not let the light blind you. It shrieked, fury churning and mixing with desperation. You are forever entwined with their failures, but I pressed on, fueled by the collective memory of love that sparked brightly within me, a force far greater than the fear. I honor you, but I am not your tool, I shouted, the light radiating like a sword cutting through the darkness. Yet even as I felt my grasp on freedom solidify, a blinding flash erupted from the monstrous eye, and the shadows morphed around me, soldiering forth in a malevolent tide, insistent on reclaiming their lost champion. You cannot escape your legacy. They howled, their chilling cries crashing into me like a wave. I felt the pressure mount, the forces of despair warring against the light I'd summoned, a dissonant struggle tearing at the fabric of my existence. The darkness, desperate to reclaim its hold, unleashed one last deafening roar as it lunged forward, tendrils whipping around me in a wild vortex, and just as the light threatened to break the cycle of pain, the abyss swallowed my scream. In that pure, white-hot fury of shadows and light, I felt myself fracture, the tenuous balance shattered by an unseen weight. And before I could comprehend the enormity of my fate, the world fell away into a deep, fathomless void, and as I plummeted into darkness, I caught the quivering outline of the light figure collapsing in defeat, its voice a whisper borne by the wind. Find me again while you still can. And in that fragmented silence, where nothing remained but the echoes of despair, I realized, with dawning horror, that another presence lurked behind me, breathing down my neck, that the darkness was not merely a concept, but a depthless entity intent on consuming me whole. A chilling stillness enveloped me. I lay sprawled on the cold, unyielding ground, my breath shallow and uneven, feeling the remnants of the battlefield seep into my very soul. The shadows coiled tighter around my limbs, alive, sentient, hungry. It felt as if they whispered sweet nothings, fingers teasingly grazing my skin, relishing the fear I exuded. I could hardly recall how long I had been in this place. Time blurred like the writhing forms that filled the corners of my vision. Remember, the voice echoed like a distant memory through the darkness, lost yet familiar. You are not just a traveler. You are kin. One of us, but I was not one of them. I fought against that idea, against the chaos that threatened to devour me. I thought of my life above, of laughter and warmth, the pulse of love that vibrated outside this hollow realm. But amid those recollections, a creeping horror coiled around my heart. What if I hadn't escaped merely to return, but rather to fulfill a legacy drenched in darkness? What if I was here to take my place among the echoes of despair and anguish, further perpetuating the tragedy those souls had endured? Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a dark figure darting in and out of the shadows, watching, waiting. A tremor coursed through me, a knowing dread choked my throat. You can't hide from your lineage, it murmured, stepping closer. I recoiled as the figure emerged from the depths, twisted and fragmented, an amalgam of all the tortured souls I'd seen before. But there was one key difference. This figure bore my family's features. Fear shattered the remnants of my power. No, it can't, Baze, it responded, grinning with a grim satisfaction that sent icy fingers racing down my spine. You've awakened the curse that binds us all. You trace the line back, deeper than you ever realized. You are ours, every bit as your blood stains the earth. Terrifying recognition washed over me. It felt as if the ground itself quaked with the weight of my ancestors' despair. With it came a hidden truth: the shadows weren't only puppets of sorrow, they were echoes of my family, reaching out for connection, for reconciliation. The entity before me took another step, the swirling fragments that constituted its form twisting as it moaned my name. Join us. Accept what you are, or be lost forever. The taunting promise dripped from its lips like poison. I realized too late that all those fragmented figures had been whispers of my own heritage, battles fought and lives lost, and here I was, standing at a precipice where the veil between my present and their pain had finally torn asunder. I managed to shout, shaking my head furiously. I won't become part of this darkness. But my voice trembled like a candle's flicker, weakening in the oppressive grasp of malevolence. Suddenly the shadows surged forward, the air thickening with despair, cocooning me in the wails of the damned. The specter yelled back, its voice now laden with anger and despair as more figures materialized, merging with the shadows' family, gone but not forgotten, their eyes shifting from grief to wrath. You cannot escape your truth. You belong here. You were chosen, chosen. I spat, grappling with the terrible truth of their words. Chosen for what? To be a vessel for ancient sorrows, yes, they chanted in unison. the cycle must continue. Do you not understand? Your blood is no longer your own, you will carry our pain, a tribute to your birthright, embraced by fire and shadow. It is your turn to play. Fueled by a surge of fear and desperation, I stumbled back, feeling the ground shift beneath me as the shadows advanced, crawling closer. Tendrils reached for me, celebrating my horror as I realized the unthinkable. The nightmares I had lived through were not mine alone. They belonged to a lineage I had long avoided, confronting a grim tapestry woven from betrayal, blood, and agony. And then it happened. My vision exploded with snippets of memories that weren't my own. I stood once more on the battlefields of my ancestors, entwined among the chaos as glimmers of lost lives flashed before me. I saw the faces of brothers and sisters, soldiers caught in a game far more sinister than I had ever dreamed. I felt their emotions wash over me: anguish, fear, desperation. They spoke through me, gasping for my allegiance. Finish the tale, cousin, they urged, bury this cycle with blood anew. You are one of us. Fury ignited within my core, clashing violently with the despair threatening to drown me. The choice echoed in my mind like a death knell: join them and keep their legacy alive, or defy the darkness entirely, risking annihilation. No. I will not let this fate consume me, I shouted back, my heart racing. With every ounce of strength, I gathered my resolve and realized the flickering light I thought lost was born from the depths of that terror. A choice to break the cycle, to sever the bond tethering my soul. From within, a radiant pulse blossomed, and with it, clarity. You can't break me, I screamed, forcing the light to erupt, pushing against the darkness within and without. As my light expanded, the grotesque figure trembled, its twisted features contorting in horror, but then the ground beneath roared. An earthquake erupted as the very core of this dark realm surged with energy, trying to reclaim me. Shadows tore at my limbs, desperately clinging to my very being, but I broke free, a defiant scream tearing through my throat. Suddenly, I blinked, and the walls of my ancestral prison began to shatter apart, the faces turning to ash, their anguish spilling out into the nothingness beyond. The dark eye pulsed dangerously, as if life depended on my failure to escape. You cannot escape. It howled, a wail reverberating through the depths as it grasped for me, tendrils becoming more frantic. You will forever endure in darkness. But I knew my truth. I was a descendant of warriors and victims, not a mere pawn. I grasped that destiny cannot define one's choice. No. I bellowed, the light surging from my core, filaments burning against the dark abyss, and then, as the shadows whipped around me, I broke free, rising past my ancestors' tortured cries, rising, until I eclipsed the madness that had bewitched me for so long. With my heart racing, I grasped the light, and in a blinding eruption, I awoke back in my apartment, breathing heavily amidst the unsettling quiet. And yet, something remained. I turned slowly, heart racing. The air, once crackling with despair, was now thick with anticipation. It was then I saw it standing at the entrance to the now familiar darkened room. The shadows converged into an amorphous shape, swirling like smoke, revealing a silhouette far too familiar. Welcome back, it whispered, its voice a horrid echo of what I had believed I conquered. You thought you escaped, but you've merely delayed what must come. The cycle continues, and in that moment, I felt cold fingers brush against the nape of my neck, drawing closer, and as horror washed over me once more, I realized I had not vanquished the darkness. It was waiting, ever patient, ever hungry, for my return. Finish what you've started, it taunted. It's your turn to play again and again and again.